It's September 3rd here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with the government's plan for emergency medical care during the Chuseok holiday. Military and public health doctors will be deployed to hospital emergency rooms during the upcoming national holiday period to make sure there are no disruptions in emergency care caused by the prolonged walkout by junior doctors. The 22nd National Assembly held a much-belated opening ceremony on Monday, where lawmakers vowed to prioritize people's livelihoods over anything else. Hamas posted a video showing the 6 hostages that were recently recovered from Gaza, threatening to release their last message to the world before they were killed. Protesters took to the streets for the second day in Israel against the government's failure to strike a ceasefire deal. The South Korean government is taming public concerns over the absence of junior doctors during the upcoming Chuseok holiday. More military and public doctors will fill the gap so that emergency care stays up and running. Choi Min-jung reports.
Around 6 months since the mass resignation of resident doctors, public concern is mounting over the country's emergency care system. With the lack of personnel in emergency units, the government has decided to deploy military doctors to fill the gaps.
We will deploy replacement personnel, including military doctors and public health doctors, as soon as possible.
On Wednesday, a total of 15 military doctors will be deployed to medical institutions with limited emergency care. Starting next Monday, approximately 235 military and public health doctors will be dispatched to high-risk institutions. The government also laid out measures to prevent a potential medical crisis during the upcoming Chuseok holiday in the 3rd week of September. This comes as the medical community warns that more university hospitals will close emergency rooms during the holiday, while the number of patients is bound to increase.
We'll operate emergency response weeks for approximately 2 weeks, from September 11th to 25th, and make every effort to minimize disruption in treating severe and emergency patients.
The lack of personnel has caused university hospitals to suspend the running of emergency rooms during the night and on holidays, causing concern that people will not receive proper emergency treatment. According to the Health Ministry, however, 99% of the emergency rooms are still operating 24 hours a day, while around 6% are operating with a reduced number of beds. The total number of doctors working in emergency rooms is a little over 74% of the average. Monday's briefing was the government's first daily briefing held to provide the public with up-to-date details on emergency care. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The opening of the 22nd National Assembly was officially celebrated on Monday, which has been long overdue. Lawmakers vowed to fulfill their duties for the people. Our correspondent Lee Si-hu has the details.
On Monday, the 22nd National Assembly officially celebrated its opening, over 3 months into its term, and 300 lawmakers were finally sworn in.
국회의원의 직무를 양심에 따라 성실히 수행할 것을 국민 앞에 엄숙히 선서합니다.
Speaker Woo Won-sik delivered celebratory remarks and said he hoped the event would serve as an opportunity for representatives to reflect on the past 3 months and also recollect their determination in working for the people.
The National Assembly will do all it can to achieve its mission to protect the people and move forward into the future.
Woo vowed that rival lawmakers would work together to tackle immediate pending issues, such as surging deepfake sexual exploitation cases and the worsening of extreme weather conditions. In the long term, the Assembly will work to alleviate population issues amid the low birth rate and aging society. The ceremony was initially scheduled for early July, but was postponed amid bickering between the rival parties over pending issues. Monday's event marks the longest wait for an opening ceremony since a constitutional amendment in 1987 that consolidated democracy in the country. Meanwhile, President Yoon Suk-yeol did not attend the ceremony, as according to an official at the presidential office, he awaits the normalization of parliament, where opposition lawmakers have been unilaterally pushing for certain bills, calling for a special prosecutor and the impeachment of nominated officials. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, along with other key members of the cabinet, attended the ceremony. Also invited were people from all walks of life, including small business owners, scientists, firefighters, medical workers, and the descendants of ethnic Koreans who resided in former Soviet Union states in Central Asia. Monday also marked the beginning of the Assembly's first 100-day regular session. Coming up first in this are speeches by rival bloc leaders, questioning of government officials, and further potential bipartisan negotiations on livelihood bills, as the lawmakers prepare for an inspection of government ministries and departments next month. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol, in a banquet with U.S. senators on Monday, stressed the importance of the South Korea-U.S. alliance, as well as their three-way cooperation with Japan in the Indo-Pacific region. Senator Bill Hagerty and Senator Chris Coons expressed their support, saying that in the face of global complex challenges, the solidarity and unity between their countries is more important than ever, while commending Yoon's courage in improving Seoul's ties with Tokyo. The banquet menu was selected by First Lady Kim Gun-hee, featuring popular Korean dishes like tteokbokki, stir-fried pork, kimchi stew, and seafood pancakes. The delegation expressed their appreciation and also wished the First Lady a happy birthday with a song and a bouquet of flowers. South Korea is hiring foreign domestic workers for the first time. 100 domestic helpers from the Philippines are beginning a 6-month pilot program starting today. We're joined by Professor Oh Jun-seok this morning. Welcome back, Professor Oh.
Good morning.
So the government has decided to adopt this type of employment amid a shortage of local caregivers due to the country's aging population and also the burden of raising children on parents. Now, what happened to domestic caregivers then? I mean, why are they moving away from their jobs?
This pilot program is a key initiative to alleviate the burden of raising children and address the plummeting birth rate. As this unique segmented market is totally different, as I guess, from domestic caregiver market, there is a little chance of conflicting interest with domestic caregivers. Let's talk about market mechanism, demand and supply. As for the demand side, there seems notably become higher and higher demand, I guess. Hiring multiple domestic helpers is much of a burden for a double-income household. It seems they are willing to pay a premium for helpers who are college-educated and can teach very good English with a desire to position their children advantageously in a globalized world. In addition, Filipino family culture is not that different from Korea. Now, go back to supplier side. These caregivers will earn Korea's minimum hourly wage for 8-hour workday. This amount to a monthly salary of roughly $1,750. This is more than double the salary paid in Hong Kong and Singapore, while about 20% cheaper than hiring a domestic worker through private companies in Korea. It could looks very, very attractive motivation for suppliers, but there is a catch. Gangnam area in Seoul is very notorious for high living costs, not to mention of rent fee. It could highly probably bone of contention, raising issue of real income once this program is initiated. And then a job description of caregiver could be potential matter of concern as well. While these Filipino workers are primarily tasked with child care, including jobs like bottle feeding, preparing baby food, bathing, and they may also take on certain incident household chores for a family, which might be taken for granted in Korean culture. But this could spark a dispute and worsen social, political, and even legal tension over the scope of additional chores related to child care.
Well, Professor Oh, so the ability to speak English and similar cultures to South Korea, these are what make Filipino caregivers attractive. But why Philippines out of all the other countries?
On August 6, 100 Filipino domestic workers arrived in Korea as part of the pilot program, modeled after similar initiative in Hong Kong and Singapore. Due to proximity, out of 10 ASEAN countries, when you ask why the Philippines, I could say definitely yes for a labor cost, yes for enough supply, and big yes again, for the ability to speak English. There is a notable expectation among applicants for English language education to be included as part of the care service. Now, change the question a little bit. If you will ask why not Malaysia or Indonesia, there are lots of young educated workforce there in Malaysia or Indonesia, equipped with good commands of English. We could easily answer to this question. The answer is definitely no, because of different religion and different culture. Most of them are Muslims or Hindus, not that familiar with exotic Muslim culture, thinking about providing halal food and then religious attires and then prayer time and providing prayer room. You could possibly expect parents in Korea might be worried about their influence on their children in their earlier times. Then what about Thailand then? It could be a potential competitor of the Philippines, but from an aging to an aged society, Thailand is also getting old before it gets rich. As of 2023, more than 20% of the Thai population were aged 60 or over, thus qualifying the country as an aged society, exactly like Korea. So the aged society of Thailand, much a lot like Korea, will open up new business opportunity in areas as diverse as healthcare, real estate, food, lifestyle, electronics, and digital technologies, which could draw attention from the young startups trying to build up their business network for a new industry sector of a seniority market. In this respect, the Philippines has the edge.
Well, Professor Oh, I do have to point out the general opinion about these helpers among many South Koreans is that it's still too expensive. Is there any way that the system can become more affordable and more accessible to more parents here in the country?
Yes, definitely. It might be considered as expensive, but it is true the future direction of the policy might be divided now. Some criticize the policy that only benefit a selected few. Others argue that the wage level should be lowered so that middle class can also afford to use the service, as you mentioned. Sarcastic comments are widespread. Why should taxpayers support foreign caregivers? Only the wealthy people can afford. And if wages for foreign workers are lowered, it could lead to a decrease in wages for domestic care workers as well. The government take a stance of providing public services and something like supplying water and subway services. Thus, price control as policy measure, it might be the top priority as a policy concern. But this might be very, very vulnerable to conflict with constitution or international standard and domestic law as well. From the point of economics, reducing wages could make it more difficult to secure workers, as foreign domestic workers have many other options once they get into Korea. The issue Korea must consider is not controlling the price, but securing enough qualified workers, noting that other advanced countries also face a shortage of care workers. Why? Based on rationality of market demand and supply, price will keep adjusting to the balance. Focusing solely on the immediate benefit of a lower cost could lead to a very significant long-term harm, harder and harder to get qualified workers. it could give signal to devalue the entire care market. To be sustainable, I might say within the framework of a free will, we know free of contract and there is a free from contract. We must find a balanced system rather than to find the affordable system.
Alrighty, Professor, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Mass protests in the streets of Tel Aviv continue for a second day, with protesters angered by the deaths of 6 hostages. U.S. President Joe Biden has also responded that Netanyahu wasn't doing enough to reach a deal in Gaza. An Sung-jin reports.
Protests in Israel headed into the second day, with hundreds of thousands of protesters pouring into the streets. The country also saw suspension of services by general strikes over anger at the government's failure to secure a deal that sees the release of hostages. These are the largest protests in Israel since the attack by Hamas last October. As the overnight demonstrations continued throughout Monday, the country's largest labor union threatened to shut down the entire economy. This comes as public fury grows over the death of 6 hostages who had been seized by Hamas.
When we hear about the 6 bodies that they came back, I think everybody feel like they have to do something, and I think it's one of the reasons that so many people came out from home.
Demonstrators voiced that the hostages could have returned alive if Netanyahu's government had successfully agreed a deal with Hamas. Hamas said that Gaza captives will return in coffins if Israel continues its attacks in Gaza, after it released a video on Telegram of the 6 hostages when they were alive, which demanded for a ceasefire deal. The Hamas statement also said that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu would be fully responsible for the death of the captives. Netanyahu responded that they were close to the deal and that Hamas will pay a very heavy price for this. However, when asked on Monday whether Netanyahu was doing enough to reach a ceasefire, U.S. President Joe Biden responded no to the reporters at the White House. Biden added that he was close to presenting a final proposal for a deal to release hostages, but negotiations mediated by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt so far failed to reach an accord. Out of the 250 hostages that had been held captive by Hamas since last October, less than half have made it back home. At least 70 have died and the rest still remain unaccounted for, with uncertainty on whether they are still alive. Meanwhile, the UK announced a partial ban on weapon exports to Israel, suspending 30 out of 350 weapon exports licensed to Israel over a, quote, clear risk the exports could be used to breach international law. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
The Russia-Ukraine war is intensifying ever since Kyiv began its incursion into Russian territory early last month. Ukraine is demanding additional weapon support from the West, while Russia said it will revise its nuclear doctrine. Lee Seung-jae reports.
While Ukraine continues incursions in Russian territory, Russia is also making advances in key Ukrainian regions. This includes the city of Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region, from where Ukrainians are evacuating and leaving everything behind as Russian forces close in. If Russia takes over the city, it would be a major blow to Ukraine, as it's known as a key transportation hub and logistics center for its military supplies. In response, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is calling on the West to lift restrictions on long-range missiles, while also requesting more weapons, which he says have already been agreed upon. Amid the escalating tensions, Moscow said it will revise its nuclear doctrine containing the principles of nuclear weapons use. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said Sunday that it will revise the doctrine in order to lower the threshold for nuclear weapons use due to the West's escalating provocations. In 2020, under a decree by President Vladimir Putin, the doctrine says Russia may use its nuclear weapons in the event of a nuclear attack by an enemy or a conventional attack that threatens the existence of the country. One of Russia's biggest allies in China expressed concerns over such threat, stressing that Moscow should regain its composure and prevent a nuclear escalation. Meanwhile, Putin made a state visit to Mongolia on Monday, despite an arrest warrant for the Russian leader from the International Criminal Court. Mongolia is a member of the ICC and are bound to detain those that have an arrest warrant issued for them. The ICC issued his arrest warrant nearly 18 months ago on charges of war crimes in Ukraine. Despite this, the Russian leader was welcomed by the Mongolian foreign minister upon arrival. Ukraine, the EU, and the ICC have called for Putin to be arrested. However, the court does not have any enforcement mechanism that would make the warrant effective. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Yoon Se-young, and this is The World Now. We start off in the U.S., where the presidential campaign is heating up. In an interview with Fox News, former President Donald Trump accused Vice President Kamala Harris of mistreating former Vice President Mike Pence. Trump's remarks came as he called Harris an unpleasant person and criticized the way she treats others. The interview also touched on Harris' questioning of Brett Kavanaugh during his 2018 Senate confirmation hearings after Trump nominated him to the U.S. Supreme Court. Harris' campaign quickly responded to Trump's remarks. The campaign posted on X saying, in a stunningly senile moment, Donald Trump just suggested it was Kamala Harris who treated Mike Pence poorly, and that Trump clearly can't remember anything, along with a link to a video of Trump's comments. The U.S. Department of Justice said Monday that a plane used by Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro had been seized and flown from the Dominican Republic to Florida after it was determined that the purchase of the aircraft violated American sanctions. The Venezuelan government confirmed that President Maduro had used the plane and condemned the seizure, calling it illegal and an example of repeated criminal behavior by the U.S. A U.S. Commerce Department spokesman said the seizure sends a clear message that our aircraft illegally purchased from the United States by sanctioned Venezuelan officials cannot simply disappear without consequence. The aircraft seizure comes amid ongoing domestic and international pressure on President Maduro connected to the country's July 28th election, which Maduro claims to have won. The opposition says it has copies of vote tallies which show that their candidate was the winner. Pope Francis has set forth on a 12-day tour of the Asia-Pacific region, which includes visit to 4 countries. Despite recent health issues, the 87-year-old leader of the Catholic Church departed from Rome on Monday afternoon local time to begin a trip spanning 33,000 kilometers, the pontiff's longest ever trip. The Pope's first stop is Indonesia's capital Jakarta, where he will stay until Friday before visiting Papua New Guinea, East Timor, and Singapore. During this tour, he is expected to deliver a strong message urging global action against climate change. The countries on his itinerary are particularly vulnerable to the effects of global warming, rising sea levels, increasingly severe and unpredictable heat waves and typhoons. Norway's Princess Martha Louise married American spiritual guru Gov't on Saturday local time. The princess, who is 4th in line to the Norwegian throne, and Gov't, a self-styled shaman from California, first announced their relationship in 2019. The wedding took place in the picturesque western town of Geiranger and was attended by royals from Sweden and Norway, as well as friends, social media influencers, and Norwegian celebrities. Although the ceremony was graced by Norwegian royalty, some critics have pointed out that the event appeared to be commercialized. Princess Martha Louise stepped down from her official royal duties in 2022 to freely pursue her business ventures. However, there has been criticism from the palace and members of Norway's parliament over how Martha Louise's royal status has been linked with commercial activities related to the wedding.
Good morning. What a pleasant, breezy weather we had yesterday in the capital area, but temperatures jumped right back to the 30s again with morning sunshine. In fact, central regions and Jeollado provinces will see highs going 1 to 5 degrees higher this afternoon. But it's nice to see most of the heat alerts being lifted this morning. Meanwhile, southern parts of Korea and Jeju will see on and off rain, with Jeju seeing up to 40 millimeters. The rest of the south will see 5 to 20. But the heat stays in Jeju with an expected high of 32 degrees. Seoul, Daejeon, Gwangju will be topping out at 31. Cloudy skies for most regions except Busan and nearby areas today. And those on Jeju need to keep an umbrella handy through Thursday. There will be slight heat relief on Thursday with rain in the forecast for central parts of Korea, but afternoon heat continues until Sunday. That's Korea for you. Here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Until then, goodbye.